Okay, I can see we've pretty much got half the people in the room now, so we'll make a quick start and get on with some of the introductions. I suppose first of all, good morning and welcome to today's webinar from us at VentureForge, and a big thank you to joining us for today's event, where we're going to be talking you through how to break the sales ceiling on Amazon, and where we'll be starting to share some insight and knowledge of what it takes to make it into the top 5 on Amazon today. As a quick bit of background, a quick introduction to me and VentureForge and some of our speakers. I'm Andy Banks and I'm the CEO of VentureForge here based in the UK. My background is 20 years in e-commerce, working both agency and client side, agency and retail side, and more latterly working in retail, where I was part of a team that built a business to acquisition by Matalan, staying with Matalan as their head of e-commerce and building that business by over £50 million in 18 months. After that, I want to start VentureForge as a specialist Amazon agency to bring back kind of my entrepreneurial background in starting businesses and getting them off the ground, and mixing with it some of that great retail rigor that I'd learned in my time working in retail and a great organisation like Matalan. We started VentureForge to help brands grow quickly and scale on Amazon, and mixing both that entrepreneurial energy and that retail rigor to help them become successful, profitable and scalable on Amazon as a sales channel. Really quick intro to us and what we do then. Today is not about a sales pitch, so I'm going to skip past these next couple of slides very quickly. But in essence, this is what VentureForge does. We mix strategic thinking, we mix operational excellence to help brands accelerate their sales on Amazon, become sustainable and grow as quickly as they can, and make Amazon into a good, profitable and successful sales channel for them. How do we do it? Well, we do that across vendor and seller, and we help brands through a fully outsourced and fully managed service across the range of 14 services that you can see on the slide there. What we do is a fully managed and outsourced service, but we also dovetail these into existing teams and existing capability to help a brand grow quicker and back up where they haven't got capability or capacity in their internal team. Sometimes it's easy to talk about what we don't do on Amazon. I think the best way of describing what we do is full service, with the exception of customer service and logistics, where most of our clients prefer to take that on themselves and keep that capability in-house, but in essence, a fully managed service for us to help brands grow sales on Amazon. So beyond the sales pitch and moving on to kind of what today is all about, today is all about helping you understand how to break the sales ceiling on Amazon. And I'm pleased to say that we're joined by 2 great speakers today who will be sharing their insight and their experience of how they've done that in their organizations and in their past lives. So I see we've got 3 great speakers, probably me plus 2 great speakers. As I say, I'll be sharing some tips on how to break into that top 5 on Amazon, and some high-level research that we've undertaken this year to look at the traits and the behaviors of the top 5 sellers, to work out across the board what does it take and what does it mean to be a top 5 seller on Amazon. We're also joined by Cal Burling, who's an Amazon specialist from Spectrum Brands. Now, Spectrum are the owners of Amazon category leaders Russell Hobbs, Remington, Black & Decker, to name just a few, and Cal will be sharing with us his learnings and experience on breaking through that sales ceiling and the great work that he's done on Russell Hobbs to get it to where it is today on Amazon. Simon Taylor is the Managing Director of SLI Retail Consultants, and he's formerly Head of Partnerships for New Look and the Partnerships Director at the M Brand Group. Simon's going to be taking us through his views on marketplace considerations and what brands need to consider to make a marketplace like Amazon a success in your business today. Throughout today, I'm sure that lots of questions will be coming up, so we'll be taking question and answers at the end of today's session. So please use the Zoom Q&A feature, which will be down towards the bottom of your screen. Get your questions into there. If we can, we'll answer some as we go, but in the main, we'll come back to those at the end and try and answer as many as we can do before we end today's session. So I suppose to kick things off, I want to start today with a bit of insight into what the top 5 do on Amazon. What does the top 5 mean, and what is the difference between the top 5 and the rest of the pack on Amazon today? Over the last 3 months, my team at VentureForge have analysed a large number of categories on Amazon, looking at what differentiates a great Amazon listing and the top 5 products on Amazon in any given category from the rest of the pack. And to do that, we've used an independent approach and many external data points to look at the top 100 selling items in many categories and really look at the difference between the top 5 and the remainder of the pack to try and understand what really does drive Amazon's success today. And the results that we've been able to pull out of that were actually quite telling. When you look at the top 100 of any category across Amazon today, the top 25 items take 70% of the revenue share. So very much that usual 80-20 rule, or in Amazon's case, more of a 70-25 rule, where 25 items take the top 70% of all revenue in a given category. But as you start to come up towards the top 5 and the top 1, this just becomes so much more focused. And the top 5 items take 35% of all revenue in any given category on Amazon. When you get that up to the bestseller, the single best-selling item in any category, that item typically takes around 16% of the revenue. And for us, that was a really kind of telling set of statistics. When you're looking broadly across many Amazon categories, and this data was very consistent across all of those categories, what you start to see there is pretty much a really clear sales ceiling for brands that they need to break through in order to succeed. Or I suppose more accurately, maybe 2 sales ceilings. That top 5 items in any given category have such dominance and such market share on Amazon that there's a ceiling there for a brand to break through to really make Amazon a key part of their business. When you go beyond that to that single bestseller and the volume and the value that comes through that one best-selling item, that's a huge ceiling for a brand to break through, and really where a brand would start to see success on Amazon. One of the big things that we took from our research was the clear link between how many units a product sells on Amazon and where those products rank organically on Amazon today. Perhaps that's really obvious that the higher you rank, the more you will sell, and there's a really clear correlation that the most visible products will sell more. But what we also found, and what is perhaps a little bit less known, is the link that we saw over time between sales velocity and rankings growth, and that these two elements on Amazon are absolutely fundamentally intertwined. The higher you rank, the more you will sell, but also the more you are selling, the higher you will rank. And those two things are completely intertwined to drive success on Amazon, really kind of double-edged sword of Amazon's success. And the most common trait of the top 5 products on Amazon was their awareness of that, the fact that sales drives rankings and rankings drive sales. The big thing we found across the top 5 products in any category, and I'll come on to this in a bit more detail in a second, was that these products all had a fully well-rounded Amazon strategy designed to do one thing, and that was drive volume, because volume drives visibility and visibility drives even more volume. And that was by far the biggest correlation that we saw on Amazon through the research across all the different retail categories. I think going into a bit more detail on this, and what I wanted to share today was a very high-level version of our learnings from the top 5, and having looked at well in excess of 5,000 products across many, many categories, what really drove the difference, or what the key traits of these top 5 products versus the rest of the pack. I want to keep this quite high level and go through this at some pace because there's quite a lot to get through. But the first thing we found that listings are really no longer a secret weapon. If you're running a brand and you're thinking that you can break into the top 5 and generate really serious revenue just by having great listings, unfortunately, that's no longer possible. Excellent listings are a minimum expectation. And by excellent listings, I mean titles, bullet points, keywords, images, enhanced brand content or A+. Every single facet has to be exceptional just to stand a chance of getting into the top 5. But in no way does it give you a way of competing and getting into the top 5 just in its own merits. You can still get incremental gains on listings. So not everyone is perfect, and you can take small market share wins when you're within the top 5 by improving your listings and taking some marginal growth. And I'm sure Carl's going to touch on this when he comes on to his part of the conversation, but you can't win on listings alone. We saw video on product pages being really heavily used by over 50% of the top 5 sellers, giving them a really clear advantage on their product listings. And that still looks like there's a good opportunity to compete by making video a key part of your Amazon strategy. I talked about EBC being part of a compelling listing, but EBC still, there is an opportunity for growth there. It's used by almost all top 5 sellers, and we'd say that really makes it a requirement, not a way of competing. But when you look at the top 5 on EBC, lots of the top 5 brands have EBC or A+ content, but they also have a lot of poor or tokenistic content. So they've put EBC up there, they've ticked the box, but that content does lack in some areas. So there are some good opportunities to maybe not gain your way into the top 5 on EBC, but to actually start to outcompete the competition when you start to get to that top 5 of an Amazon category. Moving on a little bit then, Amazon-specific imagery. Most of those top 5 brands have Amazon-specific imagery, and by that we mean infographics focused on selling product features and benefits rather than bog-standard e-commerce photos. Almost all of the brands have the full suite of 7 images, but not all of them were maxing out on every single opportunity. And that really kind of comes on to that next point about imagery still being open to exploitation, particularly in the area of the mobile customer who doesn't always read the bullet points and doesn't always read the descriptions and is heavily dependent on those product images to sell them the product almost in isolation. And there are still some really big opportunities there to exploit by brands that really pay attention to their imagery. Probably a very, very obvious point, but Prime is absolutely essential, but we would add some caveats to this. I think where the category supports or requires Prime, so by that fast-moving goods, parcelable items, items that fit into the Prime way of working, Prime is absolutely essential. And every top 5 seller, and I'd go as far as saying almost all of the top 100 that are really playing a key in Amazon strategy, utilize Amazon Prime, regardless of whether they're on vendor or seller. The exceptions here are large and bulky items, so categories, for example, furniture, larger items in the home category where Prime just doesn't work and is not available. Prime is not needed to compete, but for brands that can utilize schemes maybe such as Seller Flex, that does give them a way of out-competing the market and maybe gaining a way into that top 5 much, much quicker. Now, one of the things we've hit on here, coming on to talk about the selling model, we think would be maybe a bit of a possible myth buster here. There's been a historic view that vendor is the way that you have to deal with Amazon, particularly as a bigger brand, and particularly if you want to dominate, and almost a view that vendor will always trump seller. There's actually nothing in our data that suggests that. And when we've looked at the top 5 sellers across many categories, there's an equal mix of brands that are succeeding via seller and via vendor. So I think that myth of your vendor gives you higher rankings advantage, it gives you an advantage over sellers. We don't really see that being the case, particularly in this day and age where brands are starting to consider hybrid strategies, or some brands that are newer to Amazon and big established brands that are new to Amazon are starting to look at seller as their preferred model. People, processes, and support were absolutely key. So from a sample of the top 5 sellers that we went on to investigate, we found a couple of key things going on in the background. One, they either had identifiable people in their business responsible specifically for Amazon and specifically for marketplaces rather than a general e-commerce team, and or they had a link with an Amazon agency. So they had a key set of people identified to work with them in their business, specifically on Amazon, with processes and the right support around them to build Amazon as a key sales channel. We also found that these brands were focusing more on their overall Amazon success. And when they looked at their advertising strategy, they were focusing on what we call TACoS, so total advertising cost of sale, rather than ACoS, advertising cost of sale. And the most successful products were investing heavily in their advertising, but seems to be much more focused on their overall ROI than just the return on investment from their advertising campaigns. And what we believe that showed us was a greater focus on driving sales velocity and understanding the role of advertising in a broader mix on Amazon, rather than just seeing advertising as an isolated tactic on Amazon. And when we've worked with our own clients and we focus much more on TACoS rather than ACoS, we see the growth come much quicker on those clients. And that does seem to be a consistent trend across that top 5. Many, but not all of the top 5 made it clear in their wider marketing that their products were available on Amazon. And this is a real sticking point when we're talking to our clients. It's a real sore point for many brands. Do you treat Amazon as an incremental sales channel and do you keep it in pure isolation? Or do you treat it as a core part of your strategy? And are you happy to talk about it in all of your marketing? Are you happy to drive your own traffic to Amazon and help drive sales velocity that way? I wouldn't say this is something that all of the top 5 are doing, but we certainly saw many more of the top 5 products doing it rather than the remaining 95 products in the category. So I think this is something that certainly is a trait of the top 5, but I certainly think this is an opportunity for brands that aren't in the top 5 to exploit external traffic more to help push them into that top 5 on Amazon. I think something that Simon's going to talk quite heavily about is availability. Stock availability trumps absolutely everything on Amazon. You can't sell what you've not got, and that's a really simple concept and runs across all retail, regardless of whether it's Amazon, your store, or your e-commerce website. But on Amazon, this is much more important. All of our data says that when you're out of stock on Amazon, 1 week out of stock typically drives about 5 weeks of lost sales, because you lose your rankings, you lose your visibility. When you come back into stock after that week out of stock, that takes time to build back up. And what we've seen in the top 5 products on Amazon is consistent stock cover. I appreciate this is probably not the right time in the year to be preaching to an audience about keeping your supply chain in order and making sure you've got product to sell, given the nightmare that I think almost everybody's facing at the moment. But on Amazon, availability absolutely trumps everything. Then the final point there, focusing on the long-term visibility on Amazon, is really a trait of those top 5 sellers. They're not focused on short-term overnight successes. They're not focused just on short-term trading, be it Amazon deals, be it Black Friday, be it Prime Day, and they're not focused just on organic. These sellers are focused on driving really good long-term success. They're not necessarily focused on the short-term profitability, although they are clearly focused on profitability. They're willing to sacrifice some of the short-term for the long-term growth and success of their Amazon business. I think in terms of an overall trend, this is really the key thing that we saw there, was that all of the top 5 sellers had a fully rounded and very clearly focused Amazon strategy. And what I mean by that is they're looking at Amazon holistically. There were very, very few examples in the top 5 where the brand had a clear organic only strategy, or a paid advertising only strategy, or a trading or a discount focused strategy. The real key trait across all of these brands was that they had a clear, focused and consistent Amazon strategy that brought all elements of Amazon together to drive long-term and meaningful success to them on the platform. More than happy to share any more of the data that we found with anybody following the call, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what the top 5 is worth, that big difference on Amazon, and how those top 5 brands are trading, performing, and exploiting that to their advantage. And just moving on then, with that in mind, I think one brand that stood out to us in our analysis was Russell Hobbs. As we started to look through particular kettles, toasters, and the small domestic appliances categories, Russell Hobbs stood out as a brand that I believe in one of these categories had north of 35% market share just across a number of their lines in one given category. So we're delighted when we reached out to Cal and kind of shared the invite with him to come and join us today and share some of his insight and his tips for how he's taken Russell Hobbs to, I guess, was what quite enviable position on Amazon. So I guess without further ado, Carl, I'll stop my screen share and over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, hello everybody. I'll just switch over screens. Yes, hello everybody. So as you might have seen from the earlier slide, my slide is called The Devil is in the Detail. So what I'm going to actually look at today is I'm going to split it down into 4 points. The first one is something that Andrew's already touched upon as well, and it's something I call getting the basics right. Now, these are conversations that I've had in the company, and not just at Russell and Spectrum, but they're conversations that I've had probably in the first 6 weeks of any business that I have worked with Amazon. I'm going to take a brief look at why content, and then we're going to do a little slide that I call less research, more research. And then we're going to get into some of the detail. I'm going to show you some category specific examples within kettles. Okay, so a little bit about me as well. I know Andrew's already touched upon this, but I've got about 9 years experience on Amazon and marketplaces. That experience goes from vendor and seller. And I've pretty much done everything from answering customer services inquiries on technical tapes and adhesives to operations to account management. I think the only thing that I haven't done is actual accounts. But yeah, my current role is International Amazon Marketing Specialist for Spectrum, and I'm responsible for the content for Russell Hobbs, Remington, and George Foreman. I also am heavily involved in their advertising, and one of my main things is ecosystem navigation. So on to get the basics right. Now, as I said before, these are conversations that I've had within the first 6 weeks of any business that I've been in. And these are just a couple of quick pointers that I always like to remind everybody of. The first one is Amazon is a machine. And like this machine from this classic 1980s film, it can't be reasoned with and it can't be stopped. And by this, I mean that most of all the meaningful processes that are in place, such as stock ordering and such as the algorithm itself, are all fully automated. There are very rarely people who can actually influence this other than some of the methods that Andrew and myself use. The second one is protect your brand. Now, Amazon Brand Registry offers you so many positive benefits if you are a brand on Amazon, such as additional advertising features, such as brand stores, and also as well, it gives you the ability to battle certain things like counterfeits and basically police your brand on Amazon. So this is a must. The third one, and I'm sure this will be a theme, is keep your stuff in stock. Now, this meme that I send around, I have been known to send to a lot of people within my business. And sometimes it can be a little bit more colourful than this, if I'm being absolutely honest. But the general theme here is, if you haven't got it in stock, you can't sell it. To Andrew's point as well, yes, 1 week of lost sales, 1 week of out of stock will cost you 5 weeks of lost sales. And the final point, and this is what I always like to remind people of, is it's a two-way door. This is a very Amazon phrase, and it's something that's used quite a lot within their business. But I do truly believe this. One of the benefits of trading on Amazon is that they give you so much access to their data, and also your ability to change things. So it's a different kind of retailer. You can make changes pretty much within 15 minutes on Amazon, whether or not you're a vendor or whether or not you're a seller. So I just want to remind people why I actually decided to go for talk about content today. And I actually found this, which I think explains it perfectly. This is just a slide that I kind of got from one of the top SEO platforms on the web. And it really does explain that content gives you it's longer term gains, and it always should be part of your strategy from the beginning. So all the methods that you have here, such as PPC and social media, they do give you like quick and mid-term gains. But really, if you want to be looking at things like long-term brand equity, then you really need to focus on content and SEO. So the next one's less research and more research. I think this, since I started in Spectrum, this is one of the bigger changes that we've tried to bring into place. And that is simply data first, then opinions. I have a very, very, very set rule, and that is, if we have the data or we have something that we want to test or we want to prove, then we need to get a testing structure in place, and then we need to work out what the metrics are, and always focus on the goals, focus on what you're trying to achieve. Now, the second one, this is a phrase that I use a lot, and it's called put your customer hat on. So when you're actually looking at your presence on Amazon, whether or not this is for your brand or whether or not this is just generally shopping, you need to look at the categories that you're in, and you need to shop it like a consumer. For example, 90% plus people use the search bar on Amazon. So what you need to do is you need to think about how you yourself would go on there and shop for an item. And also, as well, as Andrew's actually touched upon with his analysis in all the categories that he's been looking at as well, you need to look at the established products. There are bestseller categories in pretty much everything these days, so that should be one of the points where you're searching and your research should start. And I kind of hate to break it to you, but if you are looking in kettles as well, there's no doubt you will come across us in Russell Hobbs. The final point I want to make on this as well, and this is something that is a constant theme, is you need to get the right people, tools, and agency if you need it. By people, I mean this is not just reports, but this is finding additional people to help you out with content, and also it means stakeholders and senior leaders as well. I'm very fortunate that I have a senior leader who is very invested in Amazon, and a lot of the testing and the experiments and the research that I've done as well. She's been very supportive of that, and she's helped me. For the right tools as well, a quick research will show you that you can get specific keyword tools, you can get specific research tools on the web. It's about finding the one that's right for you. And finally, the right agency as well. I think that one of the important things you need to realize is that there are some things that you can't do on Amazon, whether or not that's a resource issue or whether or not you just need the expertise. And for me, we use it for our PPC management. And this is back to the thing that our PPC management is 100% TACOS based. So on to content, and as I call it, the devil is in the detail. So there's a few things that I would always look at when you start out with, and there's a couple of things that we need to realize as a vendor or a seller. The first one is, and I was surprised how many businesses don't do this, is if you know something about your product, tell Amazon. And by this, I mean there are two main ways of getting your products into Amazon. So you've got a seller inventory template, and this has up to 250 columns. And then you also have your NAS form when you're a seller, which has about 200 columns. I'm not saying that you need to fill out everything because there are only things that are relevant to certain categories. But if you know something about your product, tell Amazon. Now I want to look at the anatomy of the detail page. And in my mind, a simplified version of this is it boils down to title, keywords, bullet points, and A+, in that order. I would say that changes for mobile in its title, keywords, images, and then bullet points. But essentially, these are the four big facets that you need to focus on. And these can really be boiled down into two parts. So the first one is the title and the keywords, and it's how consumers actually find your products. And then you have the bullet points and the A+ to actually help your conversion and to people to actually buy your products. So I just want to give you a very, very brief example of what I mean by find. And for this, I'm going to start with the title. This is the title that I actually made myself. And for this one, I'm going to focus on a specific text string within that title, and that is called this electric kettle. I'm very conscious of the wording that I use because cordless electric kettle and text string, I mean, it's especially a text string, and this is going back to what I said in the first slide as well. Because Amazon's a machine, it doesn't necessarily read like a human being would. It will take in each individual word, and then it will look at the relevance within those words in the algorithm. So we'll start from the beginning. So with a kettle, so as you can see here, so this is the word kettle as itself on Amazon. These results that you have here are the search volume of this per month. And this is one of the estimation tools that we use. So as you can see here, the word kettle itself has about 150,000 searches per month. But thinking about it kind of almost like aesthetically, the word kettle itself can mean a variety of different things. And I've just put some examples here as well. So if you look at the way that an algorithm would look at it, there is a potential that you could offer your product, that your product will be in a much bigger field than it would be by kind of going that one level deeper. So if we go one level deeper, so this is kettle plus electric, then you will see that your search volumes actually increase. By this, so the actual term itself, electric kettle, again, this is kind of slightly more simplified because there are a few more variations on this as well. But then as you go one level deeper, the field actually narrows. So it narrows between both a cordless electric kettle and a corded electric kettle. So then if you add that additional word on there, you will see that you suddenly start getting search volumes up. Now the phrase itself, cordless electric kettle, only gets 41 searches per month. However, because of that addition of just that one word, you're actually looking at an additional 1,000 from cordless kettle. And of course, the field narrows again. You're actually specifying what this product is. A kind of a funny story about this as well is that I seem to get asked a lot about my use of cordless. And to this day, I've always said that there's 1,051 reasons why I use cordless per month. But again, to this day, nobody still really questions about my use of the word electric, which I always find quite odd. And I think what I really want to show in this slide is that as your product searches increase, your product relevancy also increases as well. So you become more relevant to the actual Amazon consumer, but also your product competition decreases. And these are just some of the simple changes that we've really looked at in detail when I've been working on Russell. So the next section is on buy. And this again is how people actually convert. So I always follow a simple rule for bullet points and A+, and that is I clearly define the features and benefits. Here's a really good example here where you can actually say you've got kind of the marketing strap line as well, and then you've got a little bit more explanation of it as well. In this case, it's a grey kettle. But I always remember a couple of things as well, because I always try and go from history, because I have got a long experience in retail. And I used to have a sales manager that always used to say to me, and the benefit to you, the customer is. And he said that if you can't answer that question, and you can't answer that question when you're asked, then how do you expect people to know what it is? And on that same subject as well, this is the same sales manager. He always said, prepare yourself for these 4 questions, and that is yeah, and so what? This is a simple rule that I use when constructing A+. Here's a really, really good example of one of the ones that I've done here as well. And I'm not sure if you can see it because it's a little bit small as well. One of the things that I've really tried to do on this page is to try and split out the benefits almost between intangible benefits. So basically benefits like it boils 1 cup in 45 seconds and it saves up to 65% energy. So things that you can't actually see with tangible benefits. So these are things that if you were, say, walking into a shop and looking at it, you would pick up the kettle, you would look at it, you'd probably ask for a demonstration if you were considering buying it. But the breakdown for yeah and so what is yeah, never use industry specific terms. We all have them. I think that so we would use SS for stainless steel. In fashion, they would probably use SS for short sleeved, and there's obviously potentially nefarious connotations with using that abbreviation in certain points. And always explain, never leave anything to chance. So ditch ambiguity. Don't just talk about the things wider, just focus on the product that you are dealing with. Don't try and generalize, always just focus on the product you're dealing with. And what? Clear, concise, and simple language. The more that you overcomplicate things, the more that you risk losing people along the way. And also a quick note about reviews and questions. Reviews and questions, as anybody knows who's been working on Amazon, are really, really important. But for me, I'd actually, I never see anything such as a negative review. I always see it as a positive, because the fact of the matter is that people are actively engaging in your products. So really, if you take this example here, we've been asked questions, we've then developed them into bullet points, and then we've also put them in the A+. So what we're trying to do is just anticipate what the consumer wants and also plug any gaps along the way. So finally, in closing, if there's 3 things I want you to take away from this as well. The first thing is that every single thing that I have talked about here has been based on a strict testing regime. And if you have questions, ask them, but test. If you've got something that you're not happy about, go back and test it again. You will always need to get the basics right. And by basics, I mean stock. And no opinions, and just data. Thank you very much.
Carl, thank you very much. I think some really good insight there. I think for me, just really refreshing to hear somebody talking as well, 1 from the heart and 2 from a place of experience as to what it feels like and looks like to be inside one of those top brands. I think key highlights for me coming out of that is just understanding the importance of that search game. That Amazon is very much a search engine, not a browse and buy kind of marketplace. And I just love your view on testing. Put the data at the heart of every decision you make, and iterate. So I think there's some really good learnings there, Carl. Thank you very much. I think moving on next, we've got Simon, who's going to come at this from quite a different angle. Simon's got a really good broad background in working with a number of brands on their routes into different markets and into marketplaces. Very keen to kind of hear what you've got to see in your view on this as well, Simon. So without further ado, over to you.
No problem. Can you see my screen?
We've got you there. Thank you.
Great. So great presentation, Andrew and Carl. Really enjoyed it. Look, I'm going to come from this from a slightly different angle. I was kind of having a think about it yesterday. Since 2015, I've worked with 8 different businesses, either helping them to launch on Amazon or kind of rejigging the strategy a little bit, whether it's going to be vendor or seller or, how they're actually going to build the teams around it. It's really cool when, senior leadership team or CEO goes to a conference about Amazon or any of the other sort of e-tailers out there. And they kind of come back and they just say, go deliver a strategy to the team. What I usually find in most cases is, you have to kind of strategize a little bit about what's actually going on in the digital world at the moment. You know, who's actually owning all of these different operations to support Amazon, to support the growth. So really simple template that kind of helps me and a lot of the businesses I work with kind of think really clearly. Obviously, you've got your overarching multi-channel strategy, which most kind of businesses are going to be putting a lot of investment into at the moment. Obviously, within that, you've obviously got your marketing team, and they are very, very supportive of the multi-channel strategy through the digital marketing and all the direct marketing content. The bit that we're really talking about today is the channel expansion. You know, I've been to conferences with various people, and you know, some of them are product people, some of them have been marketing people, and like everybody's kind of like leaving these conferences or these meetings thinking, right, that's mine, I own that. So to start out with, you really have to define who owns it and who's a serious stakeholder. And I think Carl tipped his hat a little bit to that in his presentation about opinions. And it's really down for the person at the top of the business to decide this, because the worst thing that can happen is for kind of somebody at the top to just drop it in there and say, go deliver. If you don't really understand who's owning these pillars, it can be quite problematic, because it's great to say we've got an Amazon strategy and it's great to switch it on. But unless you're really, really clear on who is guiding and who is owning kind of these three separate pillars, it can become a bit tricky. I guess moving on from that, for me, it's really important, and I think Carl and Andrew touched on this, people, systems, processes. You know, this is really going to be the kind of the key to a lot of your success, really. And I always break it down into these three areas. And again, it comes down to that whole thing around ownership and stakeholders. You know, but in my background is commercial and product. So for me, you know, while kind of your marketing teams would be really instrumental in supporting your Amazon marketing strategy, and driving a lot of the traffic towards your various online projects, it's all about stock. Stock is key. So really from day one, you know, in terms of people, having someone who's a stock merchandiser, who's understanding the kind of the bigger picture issues in the business around stock availability is key. You know, when a business is starting out with Amazon, it can be a part-time job for somebody. It can be somebody who's already in the business who might have other responsibilities around stock. But there comes a tipping point with Amazon where it has to become something that's full-time and resourced. And obviously that can be supported internally or through working with people like Andrew. But there's definitely a tipping point there where it can all get too much, really. I think, you know, really important things that I'll touch on a little bit later around systems is your ERP dependencies. You know, as Carl said as well, it's all about the stock. You know, it's no point kind of doing Amazon or any of your other kind of online strategies with partners and not really understanding what the limitations are around your ERP. And your overall systems. You know, are you going to be able to support the sales growth? You know, I always describe working with Amazon, it's like a snowball effect. You know, once you've switched it on, providing you've got the right people, the right systems, the right processes in place, it's like literally week on week, month on month. If you're getting it right, you're just seeing this massive snowball effect. You know, and not having some of these things really understood before you switch on can be a real challenge. And then, you know, your processes as well. I think the key one on there is for most retailers and businesses I work with is new product launches. You know, how are you gonna support the growth of a new product launch on Amazon while you're also trying to do it in an owned way on your direct to customer proposition? You know, it's all of these things that you kind of need to lay out once you've decided what your overall Amazon strategy is going to be. So look, we were talking about this yesterday, Carl and Andrew and myself. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions there about Amazon, and I think there's a confusion between vendor and seller. You know, this is my kind of view, and happy to happy for people to disagree with me all the time, but this is my kind of feel about what seller can give you. You know, one of the misconceptions around Amazon is that, you know, you're going to get your products on there. You know, Amazon are going to undercut you at every opportunity they can. You know, you're not going to be able to police your brand. I think on seller that's less true, because, you know, it's a pure marketplace in effect. So, you know, you are in actual fact on seller. You have the ability to control your brand, control your lifestyle, control your imagery, and most importantly, control your price. I think where the Amazon algorithm can be a challenge is if you're a very sort of long-standing established business and you have 20 or 30 years of channel selling through various vendors, sellers, wholesalers. I think what the Amazon algorithm can do, and Carl and Andrew are way more techie than me around understanding the algorithms, is what that algorithm will do is, if you've got a whole load of sellers across the online selling space, is it will defer to the lowest price, because they will never be beaten. But if you're new to this, if you're a relatively young business and new to Amazon, that's not really not going to happen. You probably are going to have a certain degree of control when you're on Seller Central. You know, and the top one there is really important. You know, it's all about new customer acquisition. You know, there's not many businesses or brands that I've worked with in the last sort of 10 or 15 years that have had more customers than Amazon. So, you know, there's a bit of a trade-off in this as well. I think trade-off is important. You know, if you are giving anything away, I guess the trade-off in that is you're getting far more eyes on your brand, really, and on your whole proposition. So for me, you know, overall 3 brand pillars of working with Amazon, and Carl and Andrew touched on it. You know, you want to optimize your listings. You want to boost the eyes on your brand. You know, you want far more visibility, and then ultimately sales growth. You know, having worked with a couple of senior leadership teams, having worked with analysts and various boards over the years, you know, one of the key kind of eye openers for a lot of them, especially around working with Amazon, is the scale and size, not only in the UK, but also across Europe. And there's just kind of a snapshot of, you know, prime customers across Europe. And then, you know, from an international perspective, I've found over the years that if you can prove yourself on seller or even vendor with Amazon in the UK, it can open doors. You know, these guys will put you in touch with their various colleagues and teams in France and Germany, and we can see there, you know, there's the top 5 kind of platforms in Europe, and Amazon have got 1 and 2. So clearly opportunities there inside and outside the UK. So one of the things around ERP that kind of is driven out around this slide is the one at the bottom. You know, these are kind of the 3 things that we need to delight the customer. I think the fulfillment side of it for me has been key, and I've worked in various businesses where this has either been done really well or it hasn't, and it's probably not being done incorrectly, because people want to kind of start their day and not deliver for Amazon properly. I think it's never around people. A lot of it's around systems and processes. You know, if you don't get fulfillment, the service levels, or return and stock management right on Amazon, it can really undermine your whole relationship, not only with the customer, but also with Amazon directly. I think the best example for me is, you know, having worked with different businesses. Some businesses, probably sometimes businesses that have store portfolios where they have availability on stock, can grow Amazon. They can grow Amazon accounts quite well, because, you know, there will tend to be additional stock in the business, potentially at different times of the year. So there's always a willingness of, there's always a readiness for stock to be pulled from the central stock pot. I think Carl mentioned it on his presentation about stock pots. If you want to be really committed to Amazon, not only in words but also in actions, you've either got a choice. You can either let them have full access to your stock pot, which is unrestricted, or you can invest and you can have separate stock pots. But the worst thing is not really having any opinion on that whatsoever. I think the reverse side of me working with brands where they've had quite flexible stock availability is businesses where I have worked with them, and maybe they've had an online proposition only, and maybe the whole question around ERP has been a challenge. So one of the examples for that for people that might be listening in here is to go away and talk to your people in IT and tech. One of the situations that can happen is if you've got 100 units of one option in your warehouse and you've not really defined how that stock pot is going to work, you could have a situation in a peak period where Amazon's customer is trying to buy the same products as your own customers, but your ERP system is always deferring to your own customer. Now that's not wrong, because you're running your own P&Ls and what have you. But I think, as Andrew said, if that happens too often, it can really cost you like long-term sales growth and development, and also reputation with Amazon. So, my background is more around setting up the teams to be able to support not only Amazon but other channel growth, and really understanding with the senior leadership teams, what level of investment and planning do you actually need to make Amazon an overall success, really. And in summary, that's my presentation, Andrew.
Great, Sam. Thank you. I think, to be fair, that from a presentation point of view is very untypical of what you'd normally get when you start to look at Amazon. And for me, that's a massive eye-opener. And when you look at maybe a couple of things that I'm taking from that, I think number one, it's about that ownership and alignment of how is Amazon being run within the business? Where does it sit? Who owns it? How does it cascade down through those different teams? There's some real live examples in our business, and I won't name names here for obvious reasons. We've got clients that are absolutely revved up to start on Amazon, but when you start to get under the weeds and start to get things moving, there's a load of product, but the product isn't Amazon ready, and that part of the business hasn't been engaged to make sure that product is ready to go into Amazon. Or we've got another example where we've got an amazingly well established and mature client that doesn't have barcoding in place, and the knockdown impact into that business to get barcodes in place in such a large organization is significant. So for me, I think one of the big things from you there, Sam, is that who's going to do it, how is it going to happen, and what is the impact of it within the business. I think you also hit a really other interesting theme there, that Amazon is it friend or foe, and your point about having that total brand control on Amazon. It's a conversation we get time and time again. If I go on Amazon, are they going to steal my sales? Are they going to damage my brand? Are they going to damage my price point in the market? I think that really comes down to the importance of knowing the role of Amazon in your business and the selection of selling model. What role is Amazon meant to play in your business? Is it incremental sales? Is it new customer acquisition? Is it new to brand customer acquisition? And where does that start to drive your thinking around vendor versus seller? But I think the most fundamental thing that I've taken from that, Sam, is that view on people, systems, and processes, and having absolute clarity on the role of Amazon in your business, aligning resource across every part of your business to make that happen appropriately, and giving it the right level of focus. So I found that really useful, Sam. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to Q&As. I've got a fair few questions coming on the Q&As. I've got a few that have come through privately on the chat. So if I could just ask you guys to come off mute, I'll try and take these, and hopefully we've not got any slippery ones in here that will trip us up and nobody's got an answer for. But I guess kind of just picking one here that we've got coming from Marlene, very interesting points on the importance of being in the top 5 products. We're selling nutrition products on Amazon UK and US. We're a UK brand, but newer to the US. How can brands with a low brand recognition in a new market achieve more sales without spending crazy amounts? Anybody want to take that one? I've got a view, but anybody else want to jump in?
Happy for you to take that one on that one for the moment, Andrew.
Cool. I think you've got an interesting challenge there, Marlene. Sales velocity drives visibility, and it's all about relative sales velocity. So in the UK, where you've naturally got a smaller market, it's easier to spend a level of money to catch the competition and match their sales velocity, let's say, through advertising. In the US, where you've typically got 10 to 15 times the sales opportunity, you've got 10 to 15 times the competition, and that relative sales velocity is therefore 10 to 15 times higher. So I think, unfortunately, there's no way of getting away from this. Will come down to how can you drive sales velocity and requiring advertising investment, but there's also a lot of things you can do as well to leverage that success you've got in the UK. So the kind of things I'd be looking at here are making sure your accounts are linked appropriately. So your US business is already starting with the benefit of your UK reviews and ratings. You should already have some good learnings from your UK advertising campaigns that, because you're looking at an English speaking market, should be easy to port and carry across. So you may not have to go into that US market with huge investment on test and learn campaigns. It could be good levels of investment on already proven campaigns that just need tweaking or altering. I'd also say, encourage you to look at things like the Amazon Vine program, to help move reviews on quicker in that market. But I do think you are faced with that sales velocity challenge. You are going to have to spend to catch up in that marketplace, unfortunately.
If I can actually just build on that as well, I think in terms of the things from a content perspective as well, make sure you have a listing available in Spanish. It's probably one of the ones that kind of sticks out to me as well, because Spanish speakers in America are, it's pretty much 50-50, and it's looking to accelerate over the next years to probably overtake English speakers. And yeah, I mean, it's really just about the fact of, be true to your brand. Don't try and sacrifice anything when you go over there. Take what you've learned in the UK and just keep testing it on there as well. But in terms of competition as well, yeah, I mean, good luck, but it is possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. I think, Carl, you might be about to get peppered with questions here. There's a lot with your name very specifically at the beginning of them, so probably just pick one of those out now. So putting you on the spot, but Carl, your strategy feels sound and really robust. How do you know that it is evergreen? For instance, when the Amazon A11 algorithm is released, could this disrupt your views on best practice?
Yes, is the simple answer to that. In fact, I have recently done, well, I mean, I'm not sure, because everybody keeps talking about the fact that we're on A9 now. I personally think that some of the changes that have been made over the last year kind of almost moves it into an A10 one. Yeah. And then, of course, and then you're talking about A11 there. I think one of the things that I always try and do is I spend a lot of time researching the algorithm and things like that. There's some good people who look into that in depth as well. There's a few people that I follow on LinkedIn, and there's a couple of good agencies out there as well, and agencies that I work with. Again, it's always going to change. I mean, one of the things that I love about the recent changes that have been made is the fact that when you type in things like white kettle, you actually get a white kettle on Amazon now. This might seem a little bit mind-blowing as well, but that really is only kicked in over the past 12 months. So as things do change is the constant with Amazon. It's about how quick you roll with the punches, really.
Yeah, I think, Carl, to build on that, your view on looking at the data and let the data do the talking, for me, that's key. You will see an algorithmic change first and foremost in the data. And I think unless that's a huge overnight rollout, which is not what we often see on Amazon, it's incremental and iterative, that's seen in the data. So for me, keeping an eye on the data, monitoring the changes and understanding why those changes have happened is, for me, how you start to adapt to that side of thing. I think we've got one other question that's coming on chat, actually, which I think is a bit more generic, but for me builds on that a little bit. Where do you hope to see the platform go in the future?
I was going to say, it's about, yeah, I can quite easily, like, I get conscious about the fact that I get, that I talk too much, because I'm still excited about Amazon 9 years in the future. I think that Amazon's got some real challenges at this moment in time. I mean, to be 100%, the first two that spring out to me are the burgeoning antitrust things that are going on in the US. I don't think it's going to impact Amazon as much as Facebook, but I do think that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I think certainly in the way that they go to market with their own brands, etc., and how they use their customer data. The second one for me as well is that and because obviously they've had the biggest change that they've had since its inception this year as well, the fact that Jeff Bezos has stepped down from an active role as well, and Andy Jassy himself actually seems to be focusing on making Amazon a better place to work, which is kind of one of the ones that it would be nice to see this in the future. But I think in terms from how it affects us as a vendor and a seller as well, I can only see them pushing their delivery proposition, so Prime and logistics, a lot more.
I think from my side of things, I often draw a lot of parallels between where Amazon is now in terms of the marketing ecosystem and where the SEO and the PPC world was and where Google were in terms of their technologies. And the way I describe it at the moment is Amazon are 5 to 10 years behind where Google are in terms of their technology. But the thing that excites me most and that I've seen almost definitely in the last 6 months, maybe over the last 12, is the rate of change that we're now starting to see around the advertising platform, the technology, the tools that are becoming available. And it almost feels like Amazon have woken up to what they need to provide to brands and what they need to provide to agencies and advertisers to really accelerate sales on the platform. And the pace of change we've seen, even in the last 3 months, new advertising consoles, for us, agency level access to client accounts coming through on the seller side of things, not just on the advertising things. There's so much good stuff coming out from a personal point of view. And I'm equally as passionate as you about it, Carl, but probably from a different angle, as both being different sides of the retailer and agency fence. But that pace of change and the tooling up for agencies, advertising, brands to be able to do more on the platform is really exciting.
Yeah, the Opportunity Explorer is one of the ones that I'd like to kind of like shout out as well. I mean, that's looking to hopefully launch next year in the UK and EU as well. But that sounds really, really interesting. So anybody that's on the call, keep an eye out for that they're launching for sellers, because I think that's going to be a game changer.
Great. Thank you, Carl. I think it's moving on to a couple of other questions we've got. We've got another couple of minutes. We'll try and get through 2 more questions on here. Let's just pick the best ones here. How have you used Amazon to break into new markets? A bit more generic and less technical on this one.
I suppose I should take that one. I think I touched on it on the presentation. Whether it's on vendor or seller, if you can prove yourself, get your track record going with Amazon, with the Amazon teams. The teams that I've worked with have helped to support in the UK, have helped to support me. Going on trips to Seattle, meeting the guys in the States, understanding how that works over there. So reputation is really important. Saying you want to do it, but actually being able to back that up is really important. And likewise as well, having a great relationship with the guys at Amazon in the UK has opened doors for me in France and Germany. I think one thing about international is, and I think was it a vitamins company that asked the question before. It might not be so relevant for that business that asked the question, but I'm working with several different businesses at the moment some of them have already had an international Amazon strategy. 2 of them have targeted the US, which they switched on 2 years ago, 18 months ago. It's gone great, not bad. Sales have been reasonable, but they've done no real planning around returns. So, they got stock to the market. They hadn't really chosen they're probably the right sort of third-party logistics partner, and hadn't really thought about kind of some of the costs around the reverse logistics. So I think Amazon is an amazing sort of key opener to new countries and international markets. But again, the success is all in the detail. It's around the planning. Don't just think about getting the stock out there, because, depending on what sort of business you are going to get a certain level of returns. And I think it's really important to build that into your whole planning process, really.
Thanks, Stan. I think from our side of things, we've worked with a client who's broken into a new market purely via Amazon. That market, ironically, for a UK-based business, was the UK. This was a brand that wanted to grow their sales in the UK in a certain way and own and control the market. And they've done that very, very successfully. I think the key to how they made that work was having a clear view on the role of Amazon in their business. It was a key sales channel. They needed to make sure they protected the brand and the brand representation, support the activity they wanted to do into other sales channels in the market. So I think, how have we used it there for them? It's very much by having the clarity of what role Amazon plays, clarity of what we're trying to achieve from that launch into the market for them, and a clear understanding of what the expectations were from that client, and that allowed us to do a lot more on their behalf with clarity. I was going to say one final question. Apologies, we're not going to get to everything. I can see even more things coming in here. And what I'll take from is probably something that's kind of a bit more generic rather than specialist just to one person. I think this might add value to a few more people on the call. I think, Carl, it's aimed at you, but I think more than happy for everybody to jump in on this. Is your approach for listing optimization universally applied to all of the brands you managed, or are there any differentiators that you have to consider? I think, Carl, with your broad portfolio, would you mind picking that one up?
Yes, sure. Well, the principles are the same. So the way in which I kind of talk, I mean, because I talk about things briefly, like making the difference between tangible and intangible benefits. The way that I approach everything is very, very old school. I kind of try and picture a listing about how you would physically go into a shop, and you would pick up and you examine the item and various things like that. And I kind of build things back from that. In terms of the research, it's exactly the same. But the only thing that I will say is that don't just think it's a one-trick pony. So if you basically just sell kettles, you just think you need to do the research once. I will revisit that research every single time we have a new product. And it's, yeah, so I mean, really the principles are the same. A lot of the design principles are the same as well. But I do treat every single product as an individual, whilst taking into account brand considerations and everything else.
Yeah, I feel that's really valid answer, Carl. As a business, we've got very solid operational processes. We have the same way of working on every client, of course, with flexibility to adapt to that client's needs, but every brand and every product has its own requirements. It might be profitability, it might be the way they want to sell it, the brand positioning, the competitive set that you're up against. So I'd say, yeah, absolutely a rigorous process and a rigorous way of working, but a process that's designed to have huge flexibility to adapt to the circumstance, the product, the brand, or the client that you're dealing with at that particular time. Brilliant. Well, look, apologies that we're not going to get to every other question, but thank you very much to everybody who's joined us today. I think Simon, Carl, massive thanks to you guys for your time and sharing your knowledge and your expertise there. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to wrap up without saying, we're more than happy to take any other questions via email. My email address is andy@ventureforge.co.uk. And if there's anybody who's been on today's webinar that would like to chat further about how to make it into the top 5 on Amazon, we'd love to have a conversation. Please reach out to us, or we'll follow up with each of you in the next couple of days, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks for your time, everybody. Thank you.